Good morning and welcome to HogvilleNET YouTube Live. It's going to be another pregame show as Arkansas Razorbacks, 14th ranked when I start rolling this. We'll see what the Associated Press poll does here in a little bit. We'll probably still be rolling here when that poll comes out, the first regular season update, but Arkansas is 14th ranked based on preseason rankings in the AP's top 25. 2-0 Razorbacks, home wins already over Alcorn State and most recently Gardner-Webb. Game 3 against Old Dominion tonight at Bud Walton Arena, 7 o'clock Central Time. This time I plan on being there. We don't have your live coming today from, thank God for basketball, Kevin. Yeah, don't thank me, but yeah, I focus on basketball anyway, but believe me, I follow the football program and football in general. I could do what I do for basketball for football. I chose basketball because I thought football coverage was pretty saturated and basketball coverage wasn't all that great. Man, that's changed a lot. There's a lot of folks out there covering it now, but I've stuck with basketball. And so, game 3, these November games matter. You're already starting to build a resume. NCAA.net, by the way, I just talked about AP rankings about to update. The net rankings will come out soon enough, but all these games matter. Arkansas and KenPom, which is one of probably my favorite metric, looking at, different things, including rankings of all Division I teams, but also you start looking at efficiency, adjusted defensive and offensive efficiency. But in KenPom, Arkansas started at 14, just like the human polls. And then Arkansas slipped a spot after after beating Gardner-Webb, not losing, but lost some ground in KenPom, lost a spot, went to 13. Not a big deal necessarily. We keep an eye on these things. Arkansas's defensive efficiency, Musman's been bristling about some of that. Some of the lack of physicality around the basket. Arkansas gets 15 block shots, 15 to love against Gardner-Webb, and somehow the rim protection wasn't enough. Arkansas's been a good defensive rebounding team when you look at it by average and when you look at the margins. But there's more than one way to look at defensive rebounding. You could still do a good job when you're holding teams down to a low percentage shooting of getting a lot of rebounds, but you might also give up more offensive rebounds than you'd like. Certainly that's where Eric Musman's been with it. He's not been happy with Arkansas's work keeping teams off that offensive glass. Double digits for Gardner-Webb with 11 offensive rebounds and was +4 in that department in Friday night's game. And so quick turnaround for Arkansas, even quicker for Old Dominion. The Monarchs come in 1-1. Losing on Saturday in the MAC SBC Challenge, already one of those conference versus conference challenge games out of the way. A 5-point loss on the road. This is an Old Dominion team that led by a couple of points with a little over a minute to go, and the Cardinals at home closed that game out strong for a 5-point win. When you look at the first 3 opponents, all of them last season were strong offensive rebounding teams. Old Dominion's another one. Top 30 a year ago with over 12 offensive rebounds per game. So far, averaging just over 10 and a half. So a team that gets into the double digits in offensive rebounding against the opponents it's played. We'll see what Arkansas is able to do if the Hogs are able to do better defensively. That's I know Musman said in the postgame press conference Friday, they were really going to have some strong practice in between the games than this quick turnaround. So that's probably been a focal point. And the physicality part, you want to be physical without fouling. Arkansas had a lopsided advantage getting to the free throw line. When you look at this last game, neither team shot well. Arkansas was at 61%, was actually slightly better than Gardner-Webb in the efficiency. So just kind of hitting some stuff that were sore spots with Musman. Shot selection, something else he wasn't happy about. Pace and tempo at times was good. I think the problem was they didn't make enough passes in the half court. They didn't get to 200 passes per game, which is their target. They were below that. Game 1, they well exceeded it with 238 against Alcorn State. And you saw 20 assists in that game on 28 made field goals. A lot fewer assists in this last game, fewer passes. And a lot of that had to do with a tough Gardner-Webb team, scrappy team. It's a team, Old Dominion's another team last year that played in the 60s. They want to keep tempo down. You thought the same thing about Gardner-Webb coming in, similar resume. But out of the gates, off the opening tip, Gardner-Webb took the fight to Arkansas, attacked, really tried to get downhill early in offense. They didn't try to drag out possessions, drag out the shot clock, and keep possessions low. They actually, I thought, sped it up a little bit to start that game, and I thought they hit Arkansas in the mouth a couple of times there. 13-5, the Hogs chipped away. eventually built a 20-17 lead. Then it went back and forth. It was a one possession game deep into that first half. Gardner-Webb was up 31-29, and Caleb Battle kind of turned the lights out at that point. A 19-5 run. It wasn't just Battle, but 10 points in that run, 13 first half points, and he's getting at all three levels efficiently. And when you hear about three level scores, but you have to see guys, you have to really watch to see how often a lot of players really get, consistently get stuff at each of those levels. Sometimes they're more mid range or they're more this or that. He literally can go give you 2 or 3 threes a game, more probably, but he's somewhere 2 or 3 you're going to get. He's going to hit some mid-range pull-up stuff, and there's craft in there, man. It's not just how he gets to spots. I mean, in this last game, he had a crossover into a fadeaway, nothing but money. He's had some really nice setup craft to get to his shots, and then he's a guy that'll get, he'll get to the rim. He's had a one-on-one steal in the first game, and in this last game, and took the ball and got all the way to the basket. He's just a guy that, to me, is kind of fearless as a scorer, but he's been efficient. He's not been erratic. He's not been careless, and he's not made poor decisions offensively. And so when you've got a guy averaging 21 points on 56% field goal shooting, 60% from three, on a decent amount of volume, 6 of 10, and then he's 16 of 90 to the free throw line, so 83%, and that's below where his year was last year, an 89% free throw shooter. So he's probably going to elevate that, but you love the volume on all of those stats because it's not just efficiency. He's putting up a good number of shots, a good number of scoring on low number of shots. 3.5 rebounds per game. You'll take that in your backcourt. So Caleb Battle, I thought, was the player of the week last week in Arkansas's first 2 games. Now we're into another Monday, Friday. It starts off with Old Dominion tonight. Arkansas then gets hosts in the final of the 4 homestand games to begin the season. North Carolina Greensboro, a program that gave Arkansas fits last year, early December. That was the game Trevor and Brazil went down, but it's also a game Arkansas was lucky to win. That game was tough, and Greensboro led, I think, the majority of that game. And Arkansas had to claw its way to a win in that one. So you wrap up against low and mid majors, 4-game home stretch before you go off to the Bahamas. Then it's 3 games in 3 days. So this quick turnaround, it's even tougher for the visitors because they've been on the road Saturday. Arkansas played Friday night, so here's another road game for Old Dominion, the Monarchs. Jeff Jones has been around a while. I think this is his 11th season coaching that program. It's a team that won 19 games last year and I think finished in the top half of its league, similar to Gardner-Webb, the opponent Arkansas just played on Friday night. By the way, Gardner-Webb, we'll just move past that one, gave Baylor a battle on Sunday, a ranked Baylor team that's already beaten Auburn in a neutral site. Went into Waco, and had a lead, I think, in the second half. I think it was a 1 or 2 possession game about midway through that second half, and Baylor pulled away and won by 15, a slightly less winning margin than Arkansas had with an 18-point win. I missed some of those comments that are rolling up. I'm going to get back to them. They'll come back up. Thank you for joining me, HogvilleNET YouTube Live. It's our pregame show. We've identified the fact that Arkansas is 2-0, looking to get to 3-0. I fully expect they will, but that's why they play the games. You never know. College basketball, a lot of parity. It's always been that way. Really, when you go back to the late 70s, early 80s, I've been around that long, is when it really started. You started to see more and more of it. We know what can happen on any given night. It's already happened. James Madison from the same Sun Belt Conference as Old Dominion's already upset 4th-ranked Virginia on opening night a week ago today. So we've already seen one major upset from a Sun Belt Conference team going on the road to a top team in the country, a top 5-ranked team. So you're always aware of things like that. Old Dominion's got good players. Their returning guy, Jenkins, I don't know how to pronounce his first name, Chaunce, Chauncey Jenkins. 18 points so far on the season. He's an all-league guy returning from last year. And their guards are big. They have good size. He's 6'4", junior. But Jenkins, 18 points, 4.5 rebounds so far. He's been good from 3 on a small sample size, 3 of 7 for about 42%, a little over 42% there. But it's not, when you look at it as a team, it's more of a get downhill slashing type group. A lot of good sized guards, 6'5" guard, transfer from Oregon, Tyrone Williams, 13 points so far in 2 games, but had a double double in that game against Ball State. So he's averaging 8 rebounds from the backcourt of the wing. But most of these guys outside of and they're guards, and there's several other guys. Most of these guys are not good 3-point shooters, or at least by percentage so far. It was a program last year that wasn't very good shooting from three. Right now, hovering around 31%. Not a great free throw shooting so far team so far, in the 60s there. Arkansas is in the 60s right now because of that low performance in the second game. That can do that to your percentages. So that works both ways. Arkansas is probably going to be a better free throw shooting team when it counts and when it matters and when there's not 12, 13 guys playing. But you look at some of these opponents in these early games after 2 games, it's hard to take to the bank all these stats that you see necessarily. But when you look at traditionally and what Old Dominion was a year ago, not a very good 3-point shooting team. And so some of the stats already are bearing that out. They've got several guys that are, I mentioned the transfer from Oregon, but they've got, a really good freshman that had 16 points on the road against Ball State, another guard. But a lot of their guards, 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", a lot of their perimeter guys have good length. This is not a big team on the front line. You see a lot of that with mid-majors. Sometimes you see some size there, but I thought Gardner-Webb, a couple of their guys brought the beef and some decent size, although overall it didn't have the kind of size depth Arkansas did. But I don't think, Alcorn State was undersized. I think this team, on the perimeter will definitely be able to match up with Arkansas's perimeter size. And so you kind of keep an eye on some of these things that were talking points for Musselman: walling off drives, being physical when there is penetration, keeping guys from getting to the middle of the floor because that opens up everything. I thought Arkansas, going back to Gardner-Webb, after that slow start, they did start blocking some shots, but they also, it kind of invited the Running Rebels to go away from their strength. They started putting up 3-point shots. It ended up taking 23 in that game. That was 5 more than the Hogs attempted. After Arkansas went 12 of 30 in game 1, the Hogs were drilled that down to 7 of 18 in game 2. So you had a smaller diet, in volume, but Arkansas's efficiency after 2 games now is right under 40%. These are talking points. I'm kind of repeating myself from last week's pregame and postgame, or from Friday's. That was last week, but just a few days ago. You're talking about a team that's been in the 300s in just about every category in 3-point shooting back-to-back seasons. It's been ugly. And even through 2 games in a small sample size, to be dominating, you're not just doing well for yourself, you're better than the opponent. And this is a kind of a script flipper for Arkansas, because this team's also good getting into mid-range and getting downhill. We talked about Caleb Battle, haven't talked about Tremont Mark, who's been splendid so far. He gives you what you need. He's an efficient guy in his own right. 4 of 6 from 3 in game 1, 0 for 2 in the second game. He didn't overshoot it. He got to his spots. His game is in the mid-range, first and foremost. That's where he loves getting to the nail. Someone's already asking about small ball. That may be, because we're going to get into some of the problem areas. We went through some of the stuff in terms of not individuals, but some of the things that Musselman identified the team struggling with. But if you look at some of that, he may have to play more small ball lineups to maximize what he does have. Thank God for it's our best lineup going small ball. So that was the comment. Sorry, had a call coming in. I guess someone didn't get the memo. I'd be doing this, and it was blocking my view on some of those comments coming over and distracting me. But yeah, I think Arkansas, Musselman even talked about the fact that he's going to have to look at Brazil a little bit more at the 5. He's telegraphing the idea that you may see 4 guards out there. I think when we look at the fact that everybody's played who's been available, that was certainly the case against Alcorn State when all 13 scholarship players played in both halves. In this last game, it was a bit of a struggle at times in the first half. Musselman ran 10 guys out, 12 available because Leighton Blocker was out ill, but he didn't play everybody in the first half. He was able to in the second half because the game was over at halftime. It really was. If you looked at it, a 12-point lead, you understand that a second half could be different. You struggle again, and now the other team's back in it. But it really pretty quickly, 14 minutes. It was the 14-minute mark. Arkansas was already up by 20. They had 23-point leads multiple times to kind of go from 23 to 20, 19, 23, and then they got it up to 26 with about 4 minutes to go. So all 12 scholarship guys who were available got to play. So you could take that and say, well, we think we know who the rotation guys are, but there may be some unsettled stuff. I think what's not unsettled when we get to this small ball conversation, Brazil, I mean, we assume everything for him. I mean, this is an all SEC first team pick preseason. He's a guy that's on the Watts list for the Naismith Player of the Year, and he's a guy we're going to get into his stats, been efficient on a low volume of work, but very efficient, very impactful at both ends. Day one starter, everyday starter, game closer, all that stuff. And then I think it's 4 guards from there based on what they've done so far and based on even, so we'll go through that. Caleb Battle, he's the 6th man in terms of coming off the bench, but that's appearances only. I mean, that's smoke and mirrors when you realize the reality. This guy's going to be somewhere around 30 minutes most games, and in competitive games more than that, he's going to be a closer at the end of games. Tremont Mark, an everyday starter, an everyday game closer, and a guy who might be closing with the ball in his hands like he was against Purdue. Arkansas hasn't been in a what's going to happen in the last 5 minutes for us to either win or lose situation since then. That was exhibition season. But, you can bank on the fact he's going to be on the court whether he's handling the ball or not. I think the same is true of Devo Davis, even though he's been struggling shooting from 3. Take your eyes off that a little bit. He's because he's doing other things. He's rebounding. He's playing great defense for the most part. I've seen a couple of lapses, but that's been true of everybody. They're still learning to play together. But he's going to do other things, get steals. He'll facilitate. Devo Davis is a guy that's in that core. We know what he's meant to Arkansas basketball. We know there's an element of Devo where there's some games it's maybe some turnovers. I think he's kind of taken I think he's taken a slight step back early in terms of decision making on 3-point shooting. Not just because they're not going in, but they're really deep. Sometimes they're early in clock. Sometimes I saw someone on the message board in Hogville make a comment that a couple of those were late in shot clock, and so the ball was stuck with him. But sometimes he's been a little methodical on the ball late in the clock, and he's the reason why they're a little bit deeper into that clock instead of getting off of it maybe to someone that for a better shot. I'm not trying to pick on Davey. I'm just saying, but he is a core guy. There's no question about that. He's a guy that, to me, he's one of your game closers. So I've gone through the 3 guards plus Brazil, and I think right now it's still L. Ellis. I still think he's a guy that's not only your starting lead guard for now. He showed improvement. He was great in part of the preseason. Not so good against Purdue, not so good against Alcorn State. I thought he improved as a lead guard because the scorer mentality, that guy's got a lot of talent as a shot creator for himself. And there are stretches where that's helped Arkansas, including Purdue in overtime. And in the first half of that game, there was 2 or 3 stretches where his ability to go get a bucket helped Arkansas in a tight game. Game day, I agree. Who is that? Oh, I can't read. I got to put these on. Woo Pig. Those are foggy. I got to clean them off. But yeah, it's game day, man. And if you're an Arkansas Razorback fan, basketball season's here. You don't have to completely sink yourself into the other situation, although it matters to everybody. You got something to look forward to. Baseball's not that far away. But so when I look at those 4 guards along with Brazil, there's your small ball lineup. To me, those are the guys that are the most proven to this point. Ellis, again, this last game, 13 points. He kind of course corrected some things. 6 rebounds really helped Arkansas on the glass, only +6. In a game, Musselman thought they should have been better, 46-40. And then the other thing is the 3 assists to only 1 turnover. That's more of what you want from Ellis. I still think he's a little bit, I think his reads are still a little bit awkward relative to what they were. He looked really good in the decision-making early. But again, that was red-white game. What we saw in the open part of practice before the red-white game, and then the Division II game against Texas Tyler. So he'd kind of built up this idea that he'd really figured things out. Like the versatility of the whole 8-man rotation. Well, we don't know. This is where we're getting at with this. So you're talking small ball at this point. I really thought Makai Mitchell, a regular starter last year, some combination of him, Jalen Graham, who's gotten rave reviews for his work in the offseason, that he missed the 2 exhibition games. And so far through 2 regular season games, he's been efficient and done some good work. I mean, against Alcorn State, 8-8. He had 8 rebounds that led the team. Last game, 4 points, 3 rebounds. He was efficient in his time out there. And then Chandler Lawson, who was outstanding in preseason, including the exhibition game against Purdue. I mean, lights out in that game in terms of what he brings. I call him a connector, but you got to be on the floor to connect. And he hasn't seen a lot of run. Part of that's a lot of guys are playing. He got in foul trouble the last game. His efficiency's been fine. But I still think there are things, the physicality thing in his front line, I think has been a head scratcher for Musselman. He wants him to play smart, physically, with more physicality, but smart. Sometimes that's a learning curve, but you got veteran guys. You got 3 senior guys in those 3 names I mentioned between Mitchell, Graham, and Lawson. And some of these guys aren't just 4 year seniors playing their 4th season of college basketball. Some of them it's more than that. So you maybe expect a little bit more. Even this early in the season, you would hope to maybe have identified one of those guys as your ride and die for your top rotation, with the other ones backfilling as needed for injuries or foul trouble. And I think that's still a little bit of a rotation. So a couple of choices there. Are 1 or 2 of those guys in the top 8 rotation? I think when the dust settles, it very well could be. Certainly, I think one's got to be. I don't think you can go 8 deep and only have Trevor Brazile. Game closers, that's another story. Graham is not a good free throw shooter. Mekhi Mitchell's not necessarily a good free throw shooter. Chandler Lawson's been efficient as a free throw shooter and other things, but he's missed. He's not played a lot in these 2 games, and some of that's been due to some problems. Fouling's one of them. Uh, yeah, Graham does lack at times effort defensively. Give Bay Fall some run. I don't think that's the answer right now. Not saying he shouldn't play in these games. Arkansas's, built leads, and he played most of the 4th quarter. I do that with college basketball. I know there's only 2 halves, but the best way to describe junctures of the game in me are cutting it up into quarters. First, second, the first 2 minutes, second 2 minutes of the first half of the first and second quarters. You get it. And he got a lot of run. He got the majority of his minutes in that 4th quarter for Arkansas in the previous game, and so it was good to see him get some opportunities there. I don't think he's factoring into this rotation, and when we're talking front line, but he's depth, and he's a guy that on a front line where there are question marks, it doesn't take much for there to be foul trouble or somebody's gimped up or something, and now you got to turn to a guy. So I think that's why you want to get everybody minutes in games that you can. That's what these first 4 games could be. Now, Musselman said it's already drilled down. I probably buried the lead here because in that post-game press conference, he was not happy. And a couple of the questions I asked him, I don't remember specifically, but it led into rotation. He goes, it's drilled down. He's already there. So he's got an idea. And I've gone through those names. I went through the top 5 guys. I still think that trio of senior big men for that 5 spot are going to have to factor in some way or another in your top 8 rotation. And I still think a guy like Jeremiah Davenport, possibly Joseph Pinion, but probably starts with Davenport, has a chance to factor into your 8 rotation any given night or in stages of the game. You might not see, you might see Davenport check in and he hasn't been hot yet. He's streaky. He tends to put up a lot of shots to try to get hot, and I don't know that that's always going to work for Eric Musselman when you don't have a double-digit lead and you're not well ahead. I missed the first part, Woo Pig Sooie. Yeah, and I mean, so let's not go overboard and say Arkansas is strictly a small ball team or bust. I don't think it's time to say that. In fact, I just don't. When you get into SEC play and some of these other matchups that are coming right up, that I think you can do that for stretches, especially as good as Arkansas is now. If they can continue to be good from 3, spacing the floor, stretching it, and getting their guys downhill. But to play 2-man game, I mean, a guy like Mitchell can be very effective. We saw that in this last game. I thought Mekhi had his best game so far, and I know we've only played 2 games, but looking back into the exhibition season through October and through some of those other opportunities, when the lights were on and you had refs in there and butts in seats. I thought Mekhi, was 5 points, but he had a rim run early. Devo fed him for a layup. He had an offensive rebound after checking in after Chandler Lawson picked up those 2 quick early fouls and had to go to the bench. And I thought, his hit another really nice pass to Pinion, a bounce pass on a backdoor cut for a dunk. But you look past 2 or 3 assists and being a good passer. His work in 2-man game, I know people take it for granted sometimes the screen game, whether it's dribble handoffs out high, which is effectively a screen, or a true screen. The way he helps create separation and confusion on defenders, with not only as a space eater, but just his timing and his footwork and how he sets up. You see guys really comfortable. Battle pulling up from three off two-man game. Mark playing off of him to get to that nail. He loves to get to the middle and get to the nail, rise up, and he's money from that in that pull-up shot there. But a lot of that was with Makai Mitchell. So there's different things. Graham on a night where you're struggling, maybe from the perimeter, and Brazil's. You need someone that you can get the ball to around the basket. Maybe post him up. Get him to, because he's really good picking and choosing going left or right, and he gets there quickly. And he can be a little explosive getting to the rim, but he's got nice touch around the basket. The trade-off sometimes is defense and attention to detail. He's gotten better at that, Musman said, in on the offseason. The 8 rebounds in game one kind of tells you that he took that blue collar part of the scenario to heart. You just want to see more of that in his opportunities. And again, Chandler Lawson's a guy, I love the things he brings to the table, but he's got to stay out of foul trouble. And there are certain things I think that Musman wants more out of guys individually, as well as how they fit into the team scene on and off the court. So I'll leave it at that when we start talking about some of those guys on the front line. Davenport, we didn't say enough about. I still think he's going to help Arkansas. When that happens, I don't know. Yeah, we're deeper in the front line. Duke plays Arizona. That's going to be interesting. We'll have we'll know more about both teams at the end of this month when they play each other. Man, that's a Wednesday game, November 29th. That place is going to be rocking. A lot of times, even when the games, we know they're sold out, but even when there's a great crowd, when the games start, the crowd still working its way in. Those 7 o'clock starts, traffic, those kind of things, people getting off work. That's an 8:15 tip-off on ESPN. So that place should be fully loaded and ready to go wild. And I imagine the lines outside. I could just picture this scenario. Getting ahead of myself here because we got games to play. But someone brought up Duke, and that's going to be a big one. But getting back to Davenport, I do think he's going to help Arkansas. I'm not exactly sure when. Shooters like him, things might not be working against a team that's taking things away from you, and he comes in and knocks down 2 or 3 shots, and it changes the way now they have to defend. It changes you get points in flurries, and you're not just getting twos, you're getting threes. He's one of the guys that can hang multiple threes in a stretch. And so, when does that guy show up? He was there in the preseason, most of it, and then we've seen really what the reality's been since Arkansas has played Purdue in these first 2 games so far. But I think he's going to continue to get first half opportunities, unless there's something Musman sees and wants to throw Pinion in there instead and go first with him. Pinion played in the first half, by the way. Pinion had 5 points. He had 5 consecutive points for Arkansas in that kind of back and forth seesaw part of it. So he's already shown some things he can bring to the table to help the team. But I mentioned that back door on that rim run, and he got downhill and got on the baseline and got to the basket for a dunk. Defense gets you on the court. That's true. You got to be competent on that part of it. But Pinion also had a pull-up jumper for his first score, and he left his feet. It was a mid-range shot. It looked to me like he wasn't 100% sure if he wanted to shoot it or go ahead and try to find someone to pass to, but he went ahead and double clutched and shot it, and it went in for him. That was a nice play for Pinion. Pinion's a good offensive player. Defense, I think, for him and Davenport are both, people get tired of hearing some of these talking points, but there's truth to it. It's why they don't factor in automatically. That's part of why, probably the main part of why they don't factor automatically into your top 6 or 7 rotation talk, because they can do things offensively that you, if they were, as good defensively as some of the other guards or wing players, they might move ahead of them. And so that's not the case, though. And that doesn't mean they're not getting better there and that they won't, on some nights, be on the floor to close games. That could happen. I'm not predicting it. It will happen, but I think it can happen. And there's 29 more regular season games to go. It's not hard to imagine with this group and as good as these players are and positionally at all 5 spots, it's not hard to imagine several guys being on the court in crunch time. But I still think your top 5 core are the guys you're going to mostly see by a lot. I mean, by the vast majority of games that are competitive, that's probably mostly the group. And again, I'm interested to see in very close games, who does Musselman trust on that front line outside of Brazil? Who does he trust to take the game over? It was Tremont Mark against Purdue. He pushed the right button there. That may be what we mostly see. I think a guy like Devo can carry you against the finish line in some of these situations and scenarios. We haven't seen the best of Devo offensively yet, but he's a guy that's sometimes really up and down early in a season. And as you get closer to postseason, he gets better and better, more dialed in. There may still be some hit and miss and some games in between, but he gets more consistent, and he's certainly dangerous come March for anybody. Time for Devo. Yeah, let's see a bounce back. Pinion has to diversify his game to get on the court. Being a spot up 3-point shooter won't get it. Well, that's not necessarily true. That helped Arkansas in 2 wins last year in SEC play at home. Otherwise, the Hogs might have lost. He scored 13 points in each, was efficient, changed the dynamics of how it helped the offense. Now, there's other guys that can help you stretch the floor now. So it does raise more problems for him getting on the court when you've got other guys that can space it and can do other things as well. Game day, baby, let's go. Yeah, I like to see the positivity for Arkansas basketball when it's easy to kind of say, I'm putting everything aside right now and getting away from my social media. And but everybody, we know how this is with the football situation right now. Rumors are flying around and people are locked in, and sometimes the negativity gets some folks carried away too. But basketball right now is it's going pretty well. If anybody's looking at the AP rankings, they could be out by now for the men. The women came out earlier. I was hoping the men's would come out before I came on. I've got a tweet loaded and ready to go based on what the actual ranking is. So I wonder what Arkansas is in the Associated Press poll. No doubt Battle can finish games, in my opinion. Right, he's a game closer because of the free throw shooting, because of his ability to create a shot. And we know, I've seen comparisons to other guys that could go and manufacture offense. I've made some myself. I look back in just the last few years, Dusty Hannes, Daryl Macon, Jalen Barford, Mason Jones, you moved Isaiah Joe. These were guys that could go get it for you. Moses Moody was Arkansas's leading scorer, but he wasn't necessarily a go create a shot guy, but he was so good getting to knowing his spots and being effective. And he could get to the foul line and generate free throws attempted. He at times was a go-to guy, just a little bit different because it wasn't as much creation off the bounce. The same with a guy like Stanley Amude. I hope I pronounced that right. My son gets on to me about it. So some of these guys that can help you close games. But JD Notae is another one. Not the most efficient guy, not the best decision maker, but a guy that could definitely at the end of games with the ball in his hands could make something happen. Jalen Williams, to some degree, was that kind of a guy late in games because of his impact. Could pass for an easy score, or or if someone missed, he's getting on the offensive glass. So there's more than one way to close a game. But for the most part, Arkansas's had luck with their guards under Eric Musselman in those last 4 or 5 minutes. That's where Arkansas's been better. That's how you got to three consecutive Sweet 16s and a couple of Elite Eights in there, was being able to close tough games. And once you get into March, there's a lot of tough games. There's not a lot of blowouts, hardly any. So you've got to be able to finish better than the other guy. And Arkansas's pushed the right buttons for the most part on who's handling the ball late in games, who's initiating your offense, what decision making is going on there, how hard are you making it for the defense, to account for what you're trying to do. And so these kind of games right now, we're not really seeing a lot of that. And thank goodness, you don't want to have a tight game if you don't have to have it. And you want to see everybody play this early in the year if you can, not just for the satisfaction of seeing them, but Eric Musselman needs to see more and more that as much as he can of these guys. Because just remember, even with the 5 returnees, you still have all these newcomers. And I lose count because one of them, it was 9. It was 9. She had 5 returnees, 9. She had 14. One's on non-scholarship walk-on this year. We don't. By the way, I want to say this about Keon Minifield Jr. I need to take this opportunity. I've been meaning to do this. All I can tell you is the staff loves what this young man brings to the table on the court. They like him off the court, but they love what he brings to the table on the court. And so I think there's some excitement level for him in the future at Arkansas. So getting back to the 8 who are newcomers, you got 2 freshmen in there, 6 of the 7 transfers who are playing this year. So you're still trying to figure out some of this stuff because you may have a really good idea about your rotation, but how do you want to play guys and at what stages in that rotation? What other guys can maybe backfill some of that rotation based on some strengths they bring in different matchups and scenarios. So you're paying attention to a lot of things right now when you're Eric Milsman and his staff. And scouting the opponent's one thing, but you're also scouting your own guys going up against live bullets and trying to play together. We didn't move, still at 14. Okay, the Razorbacks are still ranked 14th. I guess the idea. Well, so I don't know where. Excuse me. Did I say Virginia earlier? I meant Michigan State. That upset with James Madison. I might have said Virginia, but I was thinking Michigan State. I don't know what came out of my mouth. I would like to know where Michigan State landed. And I thought there might be some bounce just because of that win over Purdue in exhibition season. Nah. And I understand that. I don't know that Arkansas suffered a lot in the poll rankings early after losing to Texas, in a landslide loss. So in Austin last year. So that's I guess being consistent. Yep, got us at 14 AP. Arizona jumped 9 places to 3. Yeah, I was interested to see how that would where that would. So some teams. Where's James Madison? No, so Sun Belt team again. Remember, Old Dominion coming in tonight, a Sun Belt team. That doesn't mean anything necessarily, but it's evidence that these mid-major, smaller leagues that they're good basketball. Some of these are good basketball leagues with good teams. There's really a good team in just about every league, and these things can happen. And so you're always paying attention to these scores and telling your team. I know Musman spends a lot of time on it. All right, we're almost 40 minutes in. I was interested to see where the rankings landed for Arkansas. Didn't change. James Madison in at 24. Okay, kind of wondered about that. 2-0 so far, I think, in the Sun Belt, but 2-0. They're not playing conference games yet, so it's not but they're in the Sun Belt. Maybe the only undefeated team in that conference, because these teams have to go on the road, get those paychecks, and it's hard to win on the road when you're playing high majors to get those bigger paydays. So I don't know how many undefeated teams through 2 games there are in the Sun Belt, but James Madison, kudos to that program to make a debut. Someone put 18. Is that the ranking for? Is that what happened to Michigan State? I don't know. Arkansas, by the way, ESPN put out its power ratings today. It might be their first regular season power ratings. I think most of all these ratings update. The metric, the analytical metrics like BPI for ESPN, KenPom. I talked about that. Some of the other ones, they kind of process daily as games are played and they update. But when you start talking about opinions that are from humans in terms of polls and all that, obviously they are week to week with the AP and coaches Mondays. And then ESPN put out its power rankings. Jeff Brazzello, that came out today, and I tweeted this out, but Arkansas was 16th in those after 2 games. And he talked about, when he had the part where he's talking about Arkansas was Caleb Battle, talking about what he did at, yeah, we understand he was a streaky scorer at Temple. So far, so good at Arkansas. The efficiency is what's really stood out to me for him. We won't move up for a while, no matter how many we win, strength of schedule. Right. I mean, so far, Arkansas's played a couple of teams. When you look at KenPom ranked at the near one in the 180s, and I think Alcorn State, so Gardner Webb was 185. I think Alcorn State was somewhere in the 200s, mid 200s. And then tonight it's another team in the 189 for Old Dominion. So you're right. Some of these so far, there's not going to be a lot of movement when you look at the metrics. There won't be a lot of movement probably in the polls until Arkansas plays somebody that the polls think worthy. And I think, Stanford's going to be a quality high major. We can still call Stanford a high major, Pac-12 team. And after that, it's Michigan or Memphis. And then you've got some ranked teams on the other side of the bracket in the Bahamas at the Battle for Atlantis. Carolina, North Carolina, Villanova, a couple there. You've also got Texas Tech over there and Northern Iowa. So for Arkansas, obviously the goal is to win that. You definitely want to advance, if you could, to the championship game. But even if you split your first 2 games, you hope you get a quality team in that 3rd game. That's what happened to Arkansas last year, by the way, in Maui. And who did they get in game 3 for the 3rd place game? They got the eventual national runner-up and a ranked team at the time, San Diego State, and that was Arkansas's best non-conference win before you got to postseason, obviously beating the number 1 team in the country, the number 1 overall seed, in the defending national champion Kansas Jayhawks. But you had 2 great wins in your season, and if you want to include winning at Kentucky by 15 points in SEC play. That was the back end of a 5-0 run Arkansas had in the middle of league play. Had won 5 straight games. So you had some quality wins last year. I know fans were not happy with an 8-10 finish in the SEC. Arkansas dealt with a lot of injuries, some youth stuff. This team's we talk about experience all the time. I didn't run back through that today. That's already obvious. Now let's talk about what our eyes are showing us on the court. We're trying to spend more time on some of that and then project ahead. So we're going to wrap it up here. We've talked a little bit about rankings. Recruiting, just real quick, we know Arkansas signed the 2 class of 2024 players who had been committed since earlier in the fall, September, for Jalen Shelley, the 6'8 combo forward from Link Academy. Early October was when Isaiah Elohim, the 6'5 wing at Sierra Canyon out in California, made his commitment. Both guys signed on the first day of the November early signing period, which was last Wednesday. It concludes this Wednesday in a couple of days on the 15th. Don't expect Arkansas to have any more high school signees. It's going to be all about portal season, unless something weird happens for an available, highly rated high school guy, and something shifts there with Arkansas. Don't be looking for another guy out of that. It's going to be portal from here on out in this 2024 class. I've gotten to see already a couple of the high school kids at Arkansas, younger players, class of 2026, gotten to look over some of their not only practices recently, when you're talking about Jacob Lanier, Jashawn, JJ Andrews, and Aiden Chronister. So in the last several weeks, I've gotten to go see those guys practice. But now some of their games are underway. Lanier with a 13 point, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, 3 steal game, and a big win over Whitehall, who has another Arkansas offer, 6'5", 6'6 guard Jashawn Hayes at Whitehall. But a blowout win, and Lanier playing the 1 and the 2. He can play the 3, but a very talented creator off the bounce. Very smart IQ guy on the court with passing, facilitating. Makes it easy for his teammates, but he can hit threes and do other things, get all the way to the rim. He'll finish above the rim. 6'6". Jason JJ Andrews, it already looks like, a college senior physically, 6'6 wing shooting guard, 19 points, 16 rebound, double-double. It was a benefit game, a big win over Nettleton for Little Rock Christian Academy on Saturday. And then Aiden Chronister, who I mentioned I got to see him practice, his season at Rogers High School. So these are all in-state guys. Some service or another has all 3 of them ranked in the top 30 in the nation for that class of 2026. This is a deep in-state class. When you start going back in history to 2017, when you had Daniel Gafford, Khalil Garland, so many guys, Day Hall, Darius Hall out of Little Rock Mills, Javon Franklin. You had a lot of Division I and high major guys that came out of that class. 2020, Moses Moody, Jalen Williams, Devo Davis, KK Robinson, Chris Moore, who's still playing at Auburn, by the way. He had multiple high majors. Probably not as deep back end, but a really, really good class. 2022 with Nick Smith Jr. and Khalil Ware and so many other guys in that class. I thought that was a really good one. I think 2026 is the next really good at the top and deep. So it's one of those classes to keep an eye on. Arkansas's already got offers out to those 3 names I mentioned, but high school season's underway. Keeping eyes on guys that are already doing things. Speaking of which, Terrion Burgess, the 6'9 combo forward at Benton, their season has started as well. But he and Jacob Lanier, who I mentioned at Maumelle, both of those guys are already told me, and I tweeted this out not so long ago, both will be in attendance at that Arkansas Duke game at the end of November. And there'll be more, believe me. There's more names we're going to put out right now. Got to sit on some of that, but I've been able to put those 2 out. So you're talking another national top 35, top 50 guy in Terrion Burgess. You love his size at 6'9". I think he's still probably growing, but a guy that's going to, I think Arkansas is in great shape with him at class of 2025. And you've got other guys around the state. Isaiah Seeley up in Springdale, also class of 2025, also national top 50 guy. This guy can play the 1 or the 2 or the 3. And on defense, he can guard those positions. He's gotten stronger. His skill, I've always liked it. His floor IQ, I've always liked. But he's now figuring out how to use that sturdy frame to kind of bully ball and have his way and combine that with the skill. And so he's a guy to keep an eye on. Big game, by the way, in Central. A lot of big games in Central Arkansas next weekend on Saturday. One of those is Springdale matching up with Little Rock Christian Academy. And some of those names I just mentioned, J.J. Andrews and Isaiah Seeley, have hog offers. Something about how many will Arkansas make. So I missed the end of that. I guess I've still got comments coming over 45 minutes in. All right, I am going to wrap things up. We're not going to talk Pro Hogs today. It's Arkansas Old Dominion tonight, 7 p.m., live streaming on SEC Network Plus. The Razorbacks are 2-0. They're still 14th ranked. Nothing new or mysterious about the AP poll. Kind of holding steady there. But I will be at Bud Walton Arena covering the game tonight. I'll have a game story that comes out immediately after the game ends. I'll add a few details. I'll sit in the press conference and go through questions with players and coach. And then I'll be back for the post game. You know, I do it. Now, I've had a few folks comment on the fact there was a lot of background noise. I did it from Press Row in Bud Walton Arena. They have cleaning crews in there that work around the arena. And it just so happened the timing of when I started, they were coming into the section right next to me, and they have leaf blowers to blow out all the trash that fans leave on the floor. And so those leaf blowers were going off, and it sounded like construction. So I'm kind of dragging out this explanation about all the background noise. I'll try to maybe brainstorm and figure out a better spot to set up this time, because I don't want all the background noise. I make enough myself going through these lengthy pre and post games, but we want you to be able to focus on the content and not the distractions in the background. So my apologies for that, but again, Bud Walton Arena tonight, post game. Arkansas 2-0, 14th ranked. Old Dominion 1-1, unranked. Game at 7:00 Central Time. Repeating one more time, SEC Network Plus. I get a lot of questions about how to watch or listen, and that's a live stream. If you don't have SEC Network, I do, which means if I were watching it from home, I'd get that for free. But there's another way to get it at ESPN Plus because it's partnered with SEC Network. Until tonight for postgame, signing off. See you then.